All right. Hello, you guys. Thank you so much to those that are tuning in to this presentation. I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. This is Advancing Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Local Government. My name is Tambriana Williams, and I thank you so much for taking the time to watch this presentation. So I will jump right in. I just want to give a little introduction about myself. So this project ultimately is to complete a final requirement for my master's in public administration at the University of Maryland in the School of Public Policy. However, ultimately, I hope that it can be used as a pillar for change. And just a little bit about my background and experience. So I formerly worked in local government. I worked as a bilingual clerk typist, which pretty much involved me working in community development, where I got the opportunity to learn about permit processes. I had never, known too much about what it takes to apply for a permit, to issue a permit, to schedule building inspections, to learn the code enforcement processes, and to learn about, city regulations. Also, a part of my position required me to translate Spanish to English in small courtroom adjudications. And so it was a very well-rounded position that I truly, truly value. But with that experience came a lot of opportunities to learn about what can take place in the workplace and how severe systemic barriers can exist in the workplace and how it can affect an individual in the long run. And so ultimately, the goal of this presentation is to address some of the barriers that exist primarily in local government. Workplace equity, is an issue in various sectors of the workforce. However, the reason I chose to focus on local government is primarily based on my personal experience, and also through conducting research about how employees, specifically employees of color, have been treated in local government. I wanted to apply some of those experiences to this presentation as well, in addition to the knowledge and skills that I've gained from my master's. And so I hope that you find this presentation to be informative, useful. Please feel free to post in the comments any feedback or remarks that you have. And I thank you once again for your time and attention to this presentation. So I just wanted to start off with a quote. This is a quote that I came across, and it indicates, besides a happy policy as to civil government, it is necessary to institute a system of law and jurisprudence founded in justice, equity, and public right. So I truly felt that this quote kind of sets the foundation of what I'm getting ready to discuss. You may have your own perspective of what this means, but really wanted to introduce this quote as I get ready to talk about how justice, equity, and inclusion intersect, specifically in the workplace. So to go over the contents, I will talk about program goals. So the goals of this project, I will talk a little bit about DEI because we hear it so frequently, right? And we all, have a general understanding of DEI, but you'd be surprised how many people still don't really truly know the origin of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and more specifically, what it is and how it affects us. I also want to share some background and research that I was able to conduct while gathering all of the components of this presentation, and then provide some policy recommendations. What are some of the methods that we can work towards proactively, in unity in order to improve the conditions of the workplace. And then also discuss stakeholders who has to be involved in order to make those changes. And I will conclude with just some final remarks. So first is program goals. So goal number 1 is to increase understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The second goal is to discuss the relevance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in relationship to local government. Goal number 3 is to offer policy recommendations to begin embedding DEI practices within organizations. And goal number 4 is to demonstrate how DEI ultimately dismantles systemic barriers. Please let me know by the end of this presentation if you think that these goals were met, and if you have suggestions for improvement on what I can include in the next presentation that discusses or covers the same content. Please, please, please provide feedback. Constructive feedback is welcome. So the first thing I wanted to discuss is what DEI communicates to a team, because some people view DEI initiatives as strenuous, as overwhelming. Sometimes people, especially specifically employers, they see DEI as something that is labor intensive. They feel that it requires a lot of resources and work that they may not have the capacity for. And some people are just tired of hearing about it. And that's really what it comes down to. But I want to share, what DEI contributes to a team ultimately. And let me make this back full screen. Okay, so diversity equals excellence. Pretty self-explanatory. DEI helps employees feel safe, connected, and respected. A diverse team influences innovation more rapidly. Employees feel a sense of belonging. DEI drives improved business outcomes, better results, and helps combat work from home burnout. Having a diverse, inclusive environment helps to retain employees. And DEI increases empathy, which then translates to increased team building. So you will notice something specifically about everything in this list. I know the title of the slide gives it away, benefits, but these are all positive. Rarely does DEI have negative attributes. If in certain scenarios, if there's negative attributes, really it's feedback from your employees that lets you know, as an organization, what needs to be done to make change. So really, it's not even so much negative, but it's really how you view it. If it's constructive feedback, even if it's negative feedback, ultimately, it's going to help your organization to know what needs to be done in order to really make a change, to begin the process of making a change. Next, I want to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So one of the mistakes we often make as human beings is just making the assumption that, because we hear something repeatedly, we know what it is, right? But it is important to recognize that we all have, implicit biases and maybe preconceived notions and thoughts. And truth be told, if that DEI was fully understood and valued holistically, every organization would have a DEI statement and plan in place. But that's actually not the case. We hear about it so frequently, and we think that, organizations have, recognize how important it is, and they at least have a statement in place. Maybe it's in the employee manual, but you'd be surprised to know and to learn that many organizations are still lacking even a DEI statement, a diversity statement, a diversity plan. And so it's important that we have a good, strong, firm understanding of what it means, what DEI means, so that we can educate others. Because every organization should have some sort of diversity statement or plan in place. That is, if they want to create an equitable and inclusive environment for all of their employees, regardless of their background. So what is diversity? So while diversity creates the potential for greater innovation and productivity, just to give you all some more information, it is inclusion that enables organizations to realize the business benefits of its potential. And equity refers to fair treatment and access, opportunity, and advancement for individuals. So then who does DEI benefit? Or who institutes DEI? So a DEI group is usually initiated by senior leadership, but also it requires commitment from all levels of leadership in order to fully, be successfully administered. And since we're focusing specifically on local government, this will usually come from those in higher positions such as the mayor, city manager, and city council. Where did DEI come from? When did we start to hear about this? Because it seems like, it became a trend in 2020 during all the social unrest and the injustice. The pandemic really started to wake people up to all of the systemic oppressions that our society is undergoing. But the DEI movement actually began in the 1960s after the Civil Rights Movement. So DEI affects all persons rooting in the historical oppression of Black individuals. That is the origin of DEI. I know it looks a little bit different in 2022, where now you're talking about religion and gender and all of those things that have their own, equity issues. However, understanding the root of something is so important, because DEI was founded on the oppression of Black individuals. Yet we can see that many Black individuals are still undergoing a lot of oppression in the workplace. And then why is it important? Why is DEI important? So DEI practices are important ultimately because we do live in a country that operates under a federal republic government structure, which have laws and regulations that were created by a homogeneous group or homogenous group, which we know is white male. And therefore the system is, very bureaucratic in this country, and change does take long. However, the more that we can educate individuals to become educated pillars, the more quickly we can help to foster change. But it truly takes unity. And so it's really important that we have a unified understanding of DEI, and that we are all making, taking unified actions in order to reach the same goal. Then, with that being said, I want to show you guys a quick video. Sometimes it helps to hear it from somebody else. This is a video of Dr. Cheryl Ingram, and she is going to provide some insight on what DEI is. So it sort of reinforces what I just mentioned, but it will go a little bit more into detail, and it's nice, like I mentioned, to hear it from a different perspective. And she has a very casual Southern way of explaining what is DEI, and hopefully you guys can even have even stronger understanding of what it is.
Welcome back to our series. Dr. CI is CEO and founder of a company called Diverse City, and this is our second season of our learning series. Did y'all miss me? Yeah? All right, good. I miss y'all too. And I'm happy to be back to share knowledge again with y'all in this day around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I also call that DEI. Now, speaking of DEI, Here we go in our first episode, we're going to break down the unit components of diversity, equity, and inclusion, what those really mean. So what is diversity? Diversity is about representation, okay? You see the things about diversity is about a collective mixture of human beings and identities that they have coexisting within a space. When I say identity, it's not your race, your age, your gender, sex, your disability, etc. And diversity is not just about the individual identity. It's also about the invisible identity. It might be from agents, etc. All the things that make us who we are fall under the umbrella of diversity. Okay? Now, you can't have a conversation about diversity without having a conversation about inclusion. Because there are some cases where diversity exists, but we practice exclusion, right? To get people in the door, you tokenize the hell out of them, and then you pay them, you don't promote them, and they fall off a job, or you mistreat them while they're there. That's why we need to have a conversation about inclusion. So what is inclusion? Inclusion is about creating a space where you have openness, belonging, respect, and you have created an equitable opportunity for people to show up and have an impact in the workplace in a meaningful way. Now, you have to have different policies and practices to be able to do that. And that's what inclusion is. And then you can't have a conversation about diversity and inclusion without thinking about equity. That's fairness. Remember, when I was talking about inclusion, I even mentioned equitable opportunity. Equitable opportunity means that it's fair and it's accessible for everyone. The difference between equity and equality is that equity is about fairness, equality is about sameness. Now, you can treat everybody the same, but in order to do that, you have to have fair practices, which means you might have to treat them differently in order to get to equality. Okay, you don't get equality without equity. You need equity first. Now, when I say that equity is about fairness, the way that we measure that is through accountability systems. So how do you measure whether or not people are being treated well in the workplace? What kind of policies and practices do you have set up in order to ensure that equity is happening? Right? It's about building the system to perpetuate fairness, to make sure that diverse populations are included in the workplace. See how I spit that out? You don't get the D without the E, without the I. Do y'all remember in 2017, Denise Young-Smith, the Chief Diversity Officer of Apple, what she did when she went to Bogota, Colombia? Anybody? She went into that conference, she set herself on that stage, and she said that there could be a room full of white men, and they could have diversity. And she was right. There's some truth to that. There's some facts to that. There's also some extreme gaps within that. Because when you talk about diversity, you can't have the conversation about it without the inclusion. And the part that she missed, her biggest mistake is that she forgot to talk about the fact that a room could have diversity in it and still be inclusive. And you can have a conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion without thinking about the visible and invisible diversity that exists. If only one visible diversity, that is homogenous. You see, you have to break diversity down within components to understand that homogeneity can exist on every level of your identity. And that's where she hit the mark. Because that was an inclusive statement because it didn't take into account the different identities that may not be in the room and why they're not there. And I think that's why the world got so pissed off. And they had a right to be. So that's the T on DEI. Y'all got it? Go.
All right, so hopefully you all were able to hear that. I do realize that the volume was a little bit low, but I do want to highlight a few things that Dr. Cheryl mentions, and that is like the accountability component. You know, how the biggest thing that I realize when I have dealt with equity and inclusion issues working in local government is the accountability component. And I think that a lot of people of color have experienced this. It's that knowing that you're being mistreated or, you know, something is taking place, you know, systemically, but there's no systems in place to hold individuals, employers accountable when those issues are taking place. There's no policies and procedures that organizations have. In other words, they're absent. DEI practices through those policies and procedures are absent, and therefore it becomes embedded in the culture to allow biases and discriminatory practices to occur. So with that being said, we can understand that DEI plans, having them in place in the long run can truly help to dismantle racism, because then you actually have an accountability method in place that protects you, that protects the employee, from experiencing those discriminatory practices. And if they do experience them, there's something in place that holds the employer accountability and protects the employee so that they can have justice in those situations. And so I really like that Dr. Cheryl was able to break it down, and I hope that you all were able to have a deeper understanding of, the importance and the significance of having DEI practices embedded in those policies and procedures, which is why this presentation will give and offer policy recommendations. All right, so that was a little long-winded, but next I want to talk about background and research. So as I mentioned previously, some people or organizations, they do view DEI plans as laborious, or, sometimes they don't feel like it's worth it. Maybe they value representation, as Dr. Cheryl said, having diversity, like invisible diversity, but maybe they lack equity and inclusion. So it's really important to understand, how the lack of DEI does, negatively impact not only the employees, but also the employer. So this is a little report here that I put in place based on a study from the Society for Human Resource Management through a cost of racial injustice report in 2021. As you can see, more than a third of Black workers report being treated unfairly in the workplace in the past year because of their race or ethnicity. That number actually is 42% for Black workers over a longer time period of 5 years, according to the cost of racial justice report. And the percentages for Asian workers was 26%, while Hispanic or Latino was 21%. And then for white workers, as we can see, it is 12%. So even post-pandemic, the coronavirus, it did disproportionately affect workers of color. So as a result of economic lockdowns, it mostly affected low-income service workers, in which, is clustered with Black and Hispanic workers. And additionally, in the past year, we've seen a spike in Asian hate crimes and abuse as a part of the false characterization of the COVID-19 virus as being the China flu. And so in addition to that, we were able to find that 30% of ethnically diverse companies are more likely to outperform their peers when there is a DEI plan in place. 56% of 56% of local governments are now prioritizing DEI. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the unemployment rate is at nearly 3.6%. However, the Black unemployment rate is roughly 5.6%, which is almost double the national average. I do want to point out that these percentages were researched about several months ago, so it is possible that these percentages have slightly changed, but give or take, they are around the same rates. So then why local government, Tammy? Why are you focused on local government for this presentation? There's another quote, because I love quotes, that I want to share. And it says, it's by Dr. Peniel Joseph. And he said, if you're going to dismantle systemic racism, you have to understand the pipeline and why and how it keeps reproducing inequality, marginalization, unemployment, mass incarceration, poverty, and racial segregation. Most of us know that mass incarceration is a significant issue. The level of government that deals with policing is at the local government level, meaning that the local government, they play a very incremental role in how policies are implemented and instituted based on the fact that they deal directly with constituents. So this was an interesting quote. Dr. Peniel Joseph, he's the founder of the Center for the Study of Race and Democracy at the University of Texas. And he conducted a lot of research in regard to local government being a key pillar in dismantling racism. And, just want to be clear that DEI and this presentation is not to really educate folks on race, but though the DEI movement, it's founded on the mistreatment and dehumanization of African Americans, this presentation is actually to show how DEI practices in the local government workplace can help to dismantle systemic barriers in government and propose solutions on why local governments should have a plan in place, at the very least, to combat, those discriminatory practices from occurring. So ultimately, we see that DEI is about making sure that everyone has a seat and a voice at the table, and how that is beneficial to all parties, meaning employees, employers, and, in relation to employers, company performance. So implementing a diversity, equity, and inclusion program in your local government can truly help to ensure that you not only hire a diverse workforce, but are cultivating an environment of acceptance and appreciation for individuals of all backgrounds and experiences. So then, why local governments again? As I mentioned, local governments are the first line. They're the officials that work closest to the communities that they serve through policing, zoning, education, and then also serving as one of the largest employers in many of the municipalities. Dismantling toxicity in the workplace. So local governments they play an essential role in order to help build stronger morale and equitable practices. And again, working closest with the employees or the constituents that they serve, the communities that they serve, they truly set the foundation for establishing those equitable policies that will help to dismantle toxicity in the workplace in the long run. And then also to demonstrate leadership. So DEI has to be initiated and supported by genuine, diverse leaders, as I mentioned before, in local governments. That usually entails the mayor, the city manager, and city council. And so, as we're thinking about how important leadership is, how important it is to have a mayor and a city manager and council members that truly understand the power of having a DEI plan in local government is very, 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 very important. And the fact that there's only 56 municipalities that have a DEI plan in place is a little concerning. I think that every local government should have a plan in place. That is a biased opinion of mine. However, we can see through the statistics and through the long-term benefits and research conducted about how employees have felt mistreated in local government, we can understand that, opinion or not, the data shows us why it's important. So next, I want to jump into policy recommendations. So there's a few stages to having these policies be implemented. And the first stage is to have leadership assessments. So are we creating diverse leaders in local government through the positions themselves? Do they possess cultural competency? Do they have the knowledge and the will and the skills to address DEI? If individuals in leadership do not prioritize DEI practices, then the workplace culture, it will not change. It will stay in its present state, which is usually not positive. So truly, indeed, change starts with leadership. Your staff are the best ones that can tell you what the issues are. Stage 2 would consist of implementing a DEI strategic plan. Because change does not take place overnight, there does need to be a strategic plan in place in order to measure change in the long run, which leads into stage 3, that is impact and accountability. So what practices have been implemented and how do they hold employers accountable? So with stage 1, I kind of mentioned this already, but one recommendation is to begin with a climate check-in. So data is one of the most critical components of measurability. So most DEI plans, they tend to dissolve after the recruiting diverse talents phase. What does that mean? That means that many employers, they start with a DEI plan, right? They're like, okay, we just want to get some minorities up in here, to shift our numbers. But then the plan dissolves after that. So then the inclusion and equity component of DEI is therefore lacking. So one consideration is to make regular surveys a requirement for staff to receive feedback ongoingly. The emphasis needs to be placed on the efficiency of management and leadership, because remember, your managers and your leaders are the ones that set the tone for organizational culture. Many people report that their culture is toxic or negative due to poor management, poor leadership. Are the leaders and the managers that are in positions adequate in their role? Do they qualify for their role? Have they received training for their role? Do they genuinely care about their role and the well-being of the staff that they monitor, that they manage? These are all really important questions that you have to ask. Then stage 2, developing a strategic plan. So all stakeholders, all parties involved in the strategic plan, all those involved in implementing the DEI plan should be involved in developing the strategic plan. So in addition to that, it's important to communicate to all the employees that a plan is in process, and it should be made public. There should be public information via email, website, etc. One really important component of strategic plans that makes them successful is to implement SMART goals. Use the SMART goals format, and also even some organizations have found it to be helpful to add a third party for assistance in developing the process. So if the funds and the capacity are in place, then hiring a third party is actually not a bad idea, as long as they are adequate and they do not dissolve after the first stage of recruiting diverse talent. And so additionally, the mayor, city manager, and city council, once again, are the ones that should sign off on the plan, because they are the ones that are leading the municipality. And so these are just a few strategic plan components. I won't go over all of them, but I'll just mention a few. It's important to have regular DEI training for employees, and especially for managers and leaders, having transparent data, making sure that you are being open and honest about the feedback that you receive from employees, reviewing salaries by gender and race, reviewing previous reports, budgeting, setting SMART goals, having a DEI committee, just to name a few. Stage 3, impact, accountability, and transparency. This is the stage that always tends to get left behind. And so it's important to continuously manage or measure the impact and efforts being made across the organization, make all employees aware of the plan and allow them to have a voice, and then provide regular updates via email, request feedback, and involvement in the DEI committee. That leads me into stakeholders. So who are the ones that should be involved, right? So as I've mentioned many, many times in this presentation, the main individuals, the main stakeholders that are responsible for implementing a DEI plan in a local government include the mayor, the city manager, and the city council. It is crucial that the leaders, senior leaders, are responsible and take accountability for the implementation of creating a more equitable and inclusive work environment, workforce. From there, you also want to have your human resources department involved, department leaders and staff members who are under the human resources department. In addition to that, internal DEI committee. So establishing an internal DEI committee that consists of those department leaders and staff members, and even community members who can provide feedback on the processes that are required to implement a DEI program, and can provide data and statistics and information on how the program is being operated. So this just reinforces the previous slide. So again, mayor, city manager, city council should all have input and sign off on the plan. The leaders of all the departments should be aware and actively involved. Human resources are responsible for sharing and reiterating DEI objectives with new employees, having an internal DEI committee to develop new strategies to engage staff, and then even general employees. So having several members of each department present and a part of this committee in order to build transparency and integrity. Okay, I hope that you guys are still with me, that I'm not boring you. I promise we're almost done. So last but not least, final remarks. So that was a lot of information. I just wanted to take a minute for everyone to just take a deep breath. And the reason being is because DEI is so precious, but also it becomes a token or an accessory in a lot of organizations. And it should never be taken lightly because these are people's lives ultimately that are at stake. And meaning that many people who have been historically oppressed continue to be oppressed through the workplace. And the workplace is where someone spends most of their day, most of their week. And it's imperative that they are protected, right? And so DEI, it is on the rise, but again, it's not something that is created to be laborious, but rather to strengthen organizations and to bring different ideas to the table. That's ultimately what it's about. So what to do next? So we talk about DEI, but how do you get started? So one of the first steps is to create an inclusion statement. When someone looks up your organization, when someone researches your municipality, and there's no diversity or inclusion statement in place, that's a red flag, especially if you're trying to recruit millennial or Gen Z employees. It's like a must. So having an official statement that is searchable shows commitment to inclusion. And again, not to tokenize it, DEI, not to make it an accessory, but having a true statement and being able to back up that statement through what? A DEI plan. is so instrumental to moving in the right direction. Next is data collection. So as I mentioned very early on, negative feedback is not the worst part. Not taking action is the worst part. So feedback is good. It might not always be positive, but it's good because it gives you the data that you need in order to begin the process of implementing change. Then having a DEI advisory committee. So gathering a diverse team of committed individuals to monitor progress and also to develop new projects and plans. And from there, continuing to build, to reflect, building and reflecting continuously, because this is an ongoing process. And again, it will not happen overnight. 2020 is when we started to see a rise in DEI plans. And so, we can see that social strategists, they predict that organizations that lack plans and concerns for DEI will find it harder and harder to retain employees. And as we can see, many individuals are job hopping like never before. But if there's a DEI plan in place that makes employees feel valued, makes them feel important, and not just makes them feel, but also backs it up. Studies show social strategists predict that organizations will find it much easier to retain their employees. So then some questions to kind of reflect on, what DEI efforts has your organization or municipality made? Have those efforts been successful? Who has been involved in previous DEI efforts? Have you exercised all of the suggestions in this presentation? How important is it for you and the leaders in your organization or municipality to ensure that those policies and procedures and missions are equitable for all persons? And also provided some inclusion statements. The state of Washington has been doing a great job at implementing inclusion statements and diversity, equity, and inclusion plans. And so if anyone would like a copy of this PowerPoint in order to have access to these links, please feel free to send me a message and I will happily email you a PDF copy of this presentation. In addition to that, these are some sample strategic plans from local municipalities as well. And not only that, but there's also some equity tools. So again, project management, performance management can be pretty challenging to monitor. And so these are some tools to help you to kind of support your employees and how to monitor those changes. And so it's more like a toolkit resources, which include many like different data resources and materials in order to track those goals and to track outcomes. So I want to conclude with a final statement. So in local government, DEI must involve various stakeholders and be instituted by senior leadership. Public officials, they should see DEI as a method to enhance workplace culture, performance, and mindfulness, rather than see it as a burden. Truly, 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 DEI can only benefit an organization. Also, I want to give a special shout out to my two supporters who provided guidance while I was developing this presentation. I want to shout out to Tony. She is the Human Resources Advisor for the City of Elgin. She guided and mentored me as a new employee when I worked in local government. I was fresh out of college and entering the workplace in local government, and it was a challenge, to say the least. And she has since been a huge support in all of my professional endeavors, and I'm so grateful for her. Chris was my professor in performance management at the University of Maryland, and he was my instructor for this independent course. And so I want to thank you for providing me with resources and perspectives as I put this plan together. Thank you guys so much. And I hope that from here on out, everyone who was able to watch this presentation, that you take action, whether you are local government leaders that do not have a DEI plan in place, or if you are students, or if you are employers or employees, please, please, please take action. We lose if we don't do anything. You know, we all want to be a part of the change, I hope. And yeah, I hope that you all found this presentation to be valuable in some sort. I hope that you found even one piece of information that you can take with you. And with that being said, I want to thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to let me know. You can definitely email me if you'd like a PDF copy of this PowerPoint presentation. And my number is also listed here as well. Thank you all so much. Please take care.